Okay, cool. And we are live.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the free Assange online vigil series, number 13.0. I'm Taylor Hudak, and I am joined with my co-hosts Andrew Smith, Christy Doff, and Steve Poikinen. Before we get started, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank Nico House and the MCSC Network, Jason Carney with the People of the 99%, and Anonymous Bites Back for collaborating with us this evening. And today marks day 174 since the brutal arrest of WikiLeaks editor and 2019 Nobel Peace Prize nominee Julian Assange, and day 3,221 of his unlawful and arbitrary detention. And as for Chelsea Manning, today is day 203 of her incarceration for resisting a grand jury subpoena, and she is now up to $93,000 in fines. So for tonight, we will be discussing the Spanish security firm that spied on Julian Assange, as well as Edward Snowden's new book and the private hearing that took place in Quito. But before we get to that, we do have a very special guest joining us. And Dak Rouleau is joining us this evening. He is an independent journalist in New Hampshire. He previously worked as a columnist for The Citizen of Laconia. He writes about the decline of American culture and the reciprocal rise of the American empire. He has interviewed Tulsi Gabbard one-on-one, and for the last 3 months, he has been asking presidential candidates to declare their stance on Julian Assange. Dak, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. How's everybody tonight?
We're doing well. So I do want to also give you credit because I obviously, wrote about the candidates and their positions on Julian Assange, and you are a main source for that article, and I use a lot of your work and I reference it. So you do a really great job, and you're very brave to question these candidates when it may not be the most comfortable position to be in. So if you could just provide everybody with a little bit of background information on what you do and how you came up with the idea to go to these different political events and question the candidates about their stance on Julian Assange.
Well, it started back in June with Andrew Yang, because I did a Google search for Andrew Yang on Julian Assange, because I honestly didn't know where he stood on the issue. I had no idea. And I found that there was no information about on that whatsoever. So I just decided, okay, I'll just go ask him what he thinks. And I was honestly optimistic. I thought he would, since he presented himself as a Washington outsider, and since I was gullible enough to think that that was true, I thought, okay, maybe he will be pro Assange. So when I went up to him with the camera, I was expecting he would give a good answer, and he really disappointed me. And then from there, I noticed that there really was no direct information about most of the candidates' perspectives on Assange because of your website. I found your website because I saw that my Yang video was referenced on there. And then I realized, wow, none of the candidates, with the exception of Tulsi Gabbard and John Delaney, had made any explicit statements. So I decided I would go and try to get them all on the record if I could.
Now, I remember you were the only one to ask Andrew Yang. I couldn't find any other information about him regarding his stance on Julian Assange until I came across your video. And, of course, in a little while, we will be showing the video with Bernie Sanders, because you had a chance to catch up with him. So that will be coming up shortly. But before we do get to that, can you kind of maybe talk about what it feels like to be in that moment when you're asking the candidates, and perhaps who has shocked you the most with their response?
I gotta be honest, it's really unpleasant. I don't enjoy doing it for two reasons. One, because the wimp within me doesn't think it's right for me to go up and stick the camera in these people's faces, even though I should, and they often give me no choice. But for another reason is I know that when I go into those events, I'm in enemy territory in a sense. Like I'm not there to support the campaign. And I don't know if they can sense it, but I know that I am not the same as everybody else in the audience. They're there to support their candidate. I'm there to try to force the candidate to answer a question that he or she definitely doesn't want to do. So it's an unpleasant bit of business. You feel very uncomfortable when you go to do it, but it's something that I have to do. And this Sunday in particular, I really didn't want to do it, but I saw that one of your co-hosts, Christy, was banned from Twitter. And when I saw that the way that these institutions are trying to crack down on people who take these kinds of positions, when I saw that that threat was being made, I said, okay, I can't just sit around on Sunday and mope. I have to go out and try to do this. So we can thank Christy for providing the inspiration for Sunday's trek into Bernieville. But you asked about the weirdest reaction I ever got. That would be Cory Booker, 100%. If I can just briefly explain what happened. I went up to Cory Booker. I went up to Cory Booker and I tried to be polite, and I asked, do you have a second to answer a question? And he said, do you mind if we do that when I'm on my way out? Because I'm just taking selfies right now. And I said, sure, that's fine. So I gave up my spot to 30 people in line behind me. And then as he was moving towards the exit, I said, hey, Senator Booker, trying to be really polite. He whispered something to his aide as he grimaces. And then he goes to do an interview with WMUR. He had his aide, who was a woman probably about my age, stand in front of me to ensure I did not go anywhere near him. And I said, what is this all about? And she goes, why are you trying to talk to him? And I said he was going to answer my question on his way out the door. And she said, we don't have time for that. I'm sorry, giving me this real Stepford Wives grin. So I followed him to his next campaign event. And I have a video of him walking past me, but not making eye contact with me, but saying, I don't have time for that right now. I'm just taking selfies. So you blow me off twice? Really? So that was the worst reaction I ever got from any of these presidential candidates. So I have a special personal spite for Cory Booker.
Oh, I mean,
I think I was just going to make one comment, and then you could go ahead, Andrew. I was just going to say that, I think it's really important to be questioning the candidates on their stance on Assange, because how they view journalists and how they view the ultimate check on power is really indicative of how they will be once they are in power and the type of president and leader that they will be. I think it tells a voter a lot with how they feel about Julian Assange. And even beyond that, it also shows where they stand on human rights issues as well.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, Cory Booker he's like a lab created Democrat.
Yeah.
And if you take just enough right-wing money and just enough right-wing talking points and just enough identity politics and just enough delivery, then you can at least get a consistent stream of donations. And that's really all that Booker's ever been good for. I completely forget that he's running for president most of the time. It genuinely surprises me when somebody's like, and Cory Booker. I'm like, oh fuck, that's right, that guy. He's still running. But for him to have anything other than malice towards the thought of a free press or Julian Assange is about on brand as far as that schmuck goes.
If you want to hear something really repulsive, he makes a speech at every one of his rallies where he talks about holding a child in his arms who died. He bled out while he was holding him. Every time he tells that story, he breaks down and cries crocodile tears at the same exact moment. It's really repulsive to see, and I guarantee he's going to do it at one of the debates one of these nights.
So, Dak, in your Andrew Yang article, you talk about why you think that Andrew never came forth with his 2 cents on Julian Assange, and you mentioned that you think it's really because they agree with Trump, and not that they're too scared to say it, but because they agree with Trump. Do you feel that's why you get sort of that vitriol reaction from the candidates, is because you put them on the spot and they don't want to admit that they all agree with Trump on Julian Assange?
That's definitely part of it. Like their views on the issue are effectively the same as Trump's, so they can't really distinguish themselves from him. Tim Ryan actually at that event had the most pathetic way of trying to have his cake and eat it too, where he said that I would not support Julian Assange, but let me just be clear that I do not feel the same way as Trump does about this. Elizabeth Warren did something similar, but also there's a bigger issue is that they know, as soon as I ask the question, they're not stupid people. They know that I'm there because I support Julian Assange. They know that they can tell just that somebody coming up and recording them asking the question, yeah, they know that I like Julian Assange. They know that this video is going to be anathema to people who support Julian Assange. They know what they're getting into.
Yet still completely unafraid to grab that boot and start licking.
Some are. Cory Booker was afraid.
Yeah. No, if there's someone who will stand up in the face of his constituents or in the faces of what is right for what the powers that be want, what his donors want, that's Cory Booker. That's your guy. Yeah.
Well, they have to show that they're going to be subservient to the NSA. I mean, I think the big reason that the intelligence agencies didn't want Trump elected was because he was saying things that were positive about WikiLeaks on the campaign trail. He was showing a hostility, however vague, towards the CIA and various other agencies. So yeah, they know where they have to pay homage, and they will do that in order to become president. So Julian Assange is collateral. He was showing a hostility, however vague, towards the CIA and various other agencies. So yeah, they know.
Not only is it collateral damage, but man, it's almost
president. So Julian Assange is collateral. He was showing a hostility, however.
Bowing to NatSec is a prerequisite not just for presidential candidates, but for anyone seeking national office at this point, especially with the number of CIA Democrats that we have right now. There was recently just CNN tried to put out this thing where it's 4 blonde white women or 5 blonde white women that all look the same that like apparently helped get Pelosi convinced to impeach Donald Trump. And they're like advertising these women as like the like the antithesis of the squad. And it's like, you know, Karen, Becky, Karsten, and Karen. And like, that's it. And 3 of them have a NatSec background.
Yeah, we see within the media a proliferation of former intelligence officials trying to present themselves as cuddly, or trying to basically ingratiate themselves to the public as cool, relatable individuals. Like on Bill Maher, he frequently interviews that despicable person, Malcolm Nance, who has regularly slandered WikiLeaks, repeating the lie that they are an arm of Russian intelligence, which is demonstrably false. The great war criminal Hillary Clinton repeated that lie in an interview with ABC News several months ago, saying that they are, quote, a wholly owned subsidiary of Russian intelligence. You have people like that despicable professor at my alma mater, Seth Abramson, pushing similar lies. I mean, it's just a disgusting rogues gallery of pseudo-intellectuals who have to support this kind of this lie, but they get paid quite a bit of money to do it.
So Dak, we do have a question coming from Charles, and he is asking, what does Dak think is the best framing of the Assange question, and what are the most relevant follow-ups when interviewing candidates for national office?
Well, I've kind of had to learn on the job, as it were, because I've come to see how they can sort of reframe the question to give themselves an opportunity to make a selling point, if that makes sense. What I've come to ask them is, as president, would you pardon Julian Assange or commute his sentence? But typically, I don't think it really matters all that much, because they're all.
That's a great point, but I think the Julian Castro video clip was it was humorous in a way, because he literally just turns his back. It's not funny because the situation is extremely serious, and we do need to have answers to this. But his response is almost, it's so absurd that it becomes comical. But you're right, there isn't always an opportunity to be asking these follow-up questions, and you have to be really quick with what you say. But I think it's always important too to be prefacing Julian's name with journalist Julian Assange or publisher Julian Assange, just to keep reiterating that point.
Well, I understand it's not funny. It's just that there's a gentleman on YouTube who runs a show called Yellow Brick Road, and he did a piece on my exchange with Castro, and he described it as him shooting a fadeaway. And that description was so perfect. I just can't stop laughing when I think about it. But no, with Castro though, it didn't matter how I phrased the question. I mean, he was already slinking away in fear as I was, asking. And I don't understand why he was so afraid. I mean, he knew he was being videotaped in that situation. So it doesn't matter how you frame. Honestly, the candidates are going to express their contempt for Julian Assange one way or the other, whether it's laughing at me or whether it's dodging the question or whether it's just flat out saying they support the prosecution. They're not going to show respect in that situation.
Does it frustrate you when they start talking about Julian Assange hurting people and giving that misinformed answer about the Chelsea Manning leaks? Is that frustrating to not counter back, or at least try to keep chasing them down?
Yeah, it would be nice to basically just destroy their arguments, but in a way, I come to expect it from these corrupt, ultra wealthy politicians who are so in bed with the intelligence agencies that they're basically just heads of the Hydra. I expect that from them. What I find really nauseating is when you have these journalists who are not that powerful and who are not that wealthy going out and gladly doing this kind of bidding for these people so high above them who won't even show them any kind of gratitude for their propagandizing. That's what I find really repulsive. I expect that kind of dishonesty from a politician. From a journalist, it's really personal for me, where it's like, no, you are not supposed to be the enemy of reason here. You're not supposed to be the enemy of truth. You should know better.
That's a great point, but at the same time, there's two clear paths that you can take as a journalist in this country. And one is to pursue truth, no matter what that truth may be, and even at the expense of your own personal liberty or freedom. The other path is, holy fuck, I get to interview the president tonight. Yeah, it's a softball. Yeah, and there's people who are going into journalism because it's because it builds their, it's a stepping stone. They're going to do the access journalism thing, then they're going to do the TV thing, they're going to sell books, and it's like a business plan for people. Yes, it's a perversion of the profession, but capitalism, like, that's where we're not running the country isn't set up for journalists, Dak. It's set up for access stenographers because we're being fucking ran by intelligence agencies.
Then those people should move to Thailand and become prostitutes in go-go bars is what they should do. I have no patience for those people. I have no respect for those people. Those are not journalists. In the words of John Pilger, they're anti-journalists. They are the enemy of journalists. Because the real journalists out there are people like John Pilger, like Chris Hedges, like Helen Biniski, and of course like Julian Assange. There is nothing I will ever do in my career as a journalist that will ever approach one tiny bit of the value of what Julian Assange achieved. He is the standard to strive towards, and these journalists who spit on him. I read this repulsive article the other day where someone described him as a minor figure in the Trumpian circus, and difficult.
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. I'm just trying to
explain the appeal of their prostitution.
Not the
I get
appeal. I'm just trying to paint a complete and realistic picture. What we do in truly independent media is not only combat the whitewashing of history, the whitewashing of the past, but we also have to combat the rewriting of real time. And the reason we have to do that is because so much of the journalistic profession is bought or compromised by global intelligence networks. And that's why you've got fucking Rachel Maddow, who can't even say Julian Assange's name and only refers to him as the WikiLeaks guy, or refers to John Kiriakou as he styles himself a whistleblower. They just introduced John Kiriakou did a segment on MSNBC for some reason over the weekend, and they introduced him as former CIA analyst and convicted felon John Kiriakou.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how real whistleblowers get treated. That's how real journalists get treated. Meanwhile, a CIA analyst can call himself a whistleblower, and the same people who are spitting on Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning wanted John Kiriakou locked up are defending this notion of which we're going to get to later in the show.
Well, when they say styled as a journalist, they are not Humpty Dumpty sitting on the wall defining terms however they see fit. I mean, they don't get to rewrite the dictionary. They can try to rewrite their own narrow political narrative, but they don't get to rewrite our basic lexicon. And so for them to say who is or is not a journalist, like that pig Joe Biden in that article in New York Times saying, "Oh, I'm not saying Julian Assange counts as a journalist." Who asked you? Where are your credentials to decide what is journalism or what is not? You're a politician, you twit.
Hey, Dak, you're supposed to reference my article, not the New York Times.
Yeah.
Come on, what the hell, man?
No, Taylor, we're not talking about journalism right now. We're talking about anti-journalism.
Good save.
Yeah.
So we had a couple questions come through in the chat. A few people had asked if you had done anything with Elizabeth Warren yet, and if you had had a chance to ask her some questions.
Oh, well, yes, but there's a problem with Elizabeth Warren. Her people don't let you get within 10 feet of her with a cell phone. They were making sure to lock that down back in January. I wrote an article for my website about when I went to her rally, and this was all the way back in January. It wasn't even a presidential rally, actually, because she hadn't announced at the time. I went up to her and I asked, "Do you support WikiLeaks?" Because this was way before even the Andrew Yang incident. And she looks at me. She goes, "Well, you heard what I said. They're just getting out the information, right?" Which I don't know why she said, "You heard what I said," because she didn't mention WikiLeaks at all in her tedious rant. But I thought, oh, great, she supports WikiLeaks. Then after Assange gets arrested, she says, "Julian Assange is a bad actor and he should be held accountable." So you lied to my face? Like, now I have a personal vendetta against you too. You and Cory Booker are, I will never, ever forgive either of them for the way that they treated me.
So, Dak, you have another question coming from Beth B. And she says, as independent media players, I'm interested in how you get access to interviewing your MPs, or do you just turn up? I would imagine they don't easily give out press passes to events. I think she's talking about access to candidates as an independent journalist, because oftentimes people that are behind the logo of, NBC or CNN probably have easier access to candidates. I think that's what she's getting at.
MP, so this person is from England.
I'm sorry, this is from Mickey, not Beth. We'll get to Beth's question next.
Yeah, no, I see this, but I'm assuming by MP she's referring to this must be an English woman.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Well, as far as that is concerned, unless the person is already friendly towards Julian Assange, you're not going to be able to get a whole lot out of them. I mean, like trying to get an interview with these people is very difficult. Like to get a full-on private exclusive interview with a presidential candidate is nigh impossible. I had to go to about 12 Tulsi Gabbard rallies before I finally got an interview with her. But as for her question, yeah, I mean, you could bug their staff. You could really, really pester them. You could just go up and stick the camera in their faces if you can, because they are getting so good at fortifying themselves and guarding against independent journalists that the avenues of information are becoming narrower and narrower. And this is totally separate from the question of whether or not Assange will be prosecuted. Even if they dropped all the charges right now, still getting that kind of direct access to a candidate is becoming it's requiring way more effort than it really should have to.
Right, because they have, their campaign staffers around them, basically cutting you off when you're the journalist asking them questions. But this is the question from Beth B. Now. She
Yeah.
has a question for Dak. Do you think it would make a difference if you prefaced your questions about Julian with the ACLU's warnings about his prosecution and how it will affect other journalists?
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I didn't think about that. Like I said, I had to learn on the job here because I had no model for it because the media didn't provide me with a model. So good job at MSNBC. But yeah, I guess it would probably, if I were to say, you could, but at the same time, I said to Tim Ryan that I thought that Julian Assange's prosecution is part of Trump's war on journalism. If they can't hit that kind of a softball, then I don't think they're going to be too phased by whatever the ACLU has to say. But yeah, that's worth a try. I could try to go up to these people again, see if they don't recognize me, and ask the question all over again. But I don't know if I have the stomach for that.
So another question from Mickey. He or she is asking, have you got any advice for grassroots activists and how to amplify their message out?
Yeah, and it's not what the grassroots activists want to hear, but so many people ask me, why don't I just go and start screaming at the rallies like, do you support Julian Assange? That is the last thing you want to do, because it makes Assange's people look like unhinged, unreasonable lunatics. Basically, you feed into that image that the media needs in order to maintain this war of this PR war against him. So you have to just, what I was hoping to do on Sunday when I went to the Bernie rally was I wanted to get as many Julian Assange activists as possible to go with me to maximize our chances of being called upon when he took questions from the audience. That's really the best way to do it, is to flood these candidates' rallies with your people, so that if they call on someone, the odds are better that you get someone who's going to ask about Assange. You have to play their game, basically.
Exactly. Now, there is another question. I don't know if you will be able to answer this, though, because it does address Bernie, and we have not shown that video yet. This is from Free. My question for Dak is just, will Bernie be dropping the case completely okay, so I guess you can't really answer that, because we do want you guys to see the video footage to see how he responds to that question. Yes. So we'll hold off on that, and your question will be answered shortly.
So Dak, is there anybody else that you want to ask after this?
Other candidates?
Mm-hmm.
I actually tweeted about this. I said I wasn't sure if this was going to be the end, because at this point, do I really need to go up to Kamala Harris and ask her about Assange? Like, is anybody really in the dark on that issue? I mean, nobody was going to be in the dark about Cory Booker either, but I decided to give it a shot. My thing is this: the Andrew Yang question, and I do take a bit of pride in the fact that that is the only source of information we have on Andrew Yang vis-a-vis Assange. But at the same time, that video caused a bit of a stir, because there are well-meaning progressives out there who want to believe in someone like Andrew Yang. They want to look at him and they want him to be on their side. They want him to be one of the good ones. And it turned out that he wasn't. When I uploaded the video of Beto O'Rourke answering the question, nobody cares, because nobody believed in Beto O'Rourke. The only people remaining are people that well-meaning, thoughtful progressives don't believe in anyway. So the answer isn't going to sway them one way or the other. So I'm on the fence about that. Is it really worth my time to go out and ask Tom Steyer, who's a hardcore Russiagator, how he feels about Julian Assange?
I think it is important. Personally, I think that's one of the most important things we can be doing right now. And I love the fact that you're doing it. And I wish there was more people out there doing it right now. Because at the end of the day, we have to be Julian's voice. We have to be the people asking the questions and pressuring politicians to answer these questions. Because if we don't, no one else will. And that's why I'm so honored to have you with us, is actually having you as someone out there in the field asking these questions and doing that work. Even if we already know we're going to get the answers, it just puts it on paper again for everybody. And I think that's super important.
But at the same time, like, that's my point here, is why is it that my video on Andrew Yang is literally the only source? Like, why is that? Why am I the only one who took the time to go out and just ask these people these questions? Like, this isn't hard. I mean, I wasn't doing anything on Sunday. Like, yeah, I could just sit here and sink into apathy and drink my ass off and watch football, but I can't do that. It's like, it would make me feel like a total waste of DNA. Like, other people, like I wish other people would join me. I went to that Bernie rally alone, but that's fine. But at the same time, it's just that I wish other people would, like, take this initiative themselves. It's not hard. It's not hard to go to these rallies and to do this, especially if you have people with you to give you emotional support or whatever. I mean, it's really not that hard. So yeah, everybody watching this, like, please make me irrelevant. Go to these rallies and do what I've been doing. This
is exactly what what we mean when we talk about decentralized activism every week on the show here. It's small groups of people that can't be infiltrated or compromised, going and performing an action, and you can do that at the same time that other people are performing the same or similar action in many different areas, and you can be impactful that way. You're right, it is more effective to have a one-on-one interaction and ask a question about Julian and Assange than it is to raise hell. And with that in mind, Andrew has the video that you shot over the weekend queued up. And when he sabotage at me or ill communication, we will go ahead and run that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we should, the people want to watch that. They don't want to hear from me necessarily, so we can.
Right, we're gonna have that pulled up pretty soon.
I'm getting that right now.
I do want to thank you though, Dak. Again, I did mention at the beginning of the stream, you contributed so much to my article. It was really something that we started to work on together. Of course, I wrote it, I did the research, but as within the past, month, in 2 months, you've asked many more candidates their stance on Julian Assange, and you were always communicating with me when you did so, and that is just greatly appreciated. I thank you for that, because it's good to have somebody out there, of course, doing this.
So I am pulling my screen up now with the video.
So we do have the video now. I'm excited for everyone to see.
Hold on. I can't get it to work right.
I can do it on my screen.
Yeah, if you could, that would be awesome, because I can't get it to pop up properly. It keeps closing out.
You guys will just have to guide me. Hang on a second. Let's go back to speaking.
The bottom button that says share, if you hit that, you can switch around to whatever desktop or screen or what have you.
Just a moment. Are you seeing my screen right now?
No.
Okay, hang on a moment. Okay.
Best laid plans.
All right, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, then everybody, here we are. Bernie Sanders on Julian Assange.
I don't think we could hear it. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah, the audio wasn't playing. When you pull that little box up, click share computer sound in the bottom left-hand corner of that box.
Oh, so did nobody hear that?
No, no one heard that one.
That is hilarious. Okay, wait a minute. So where do I go? I'm sorry.
When you hit the share button, I love live streams. The bottom right, the bottom left-hand corner, share computer sound.
I am one. Wow. Okay. All right. So we start that over again.
Yep.
All right. So now for real, Bernie Sanders on Julian Assange.
Bernie, man. Hey, do it.
you support Julian Assange?
Do I support Julian Assange?
Will you pardon him?
It's a long, I can't say it just yet. It's a long story.
Please, sir, please.
I'm aware of the issue.
Will you pardon him? Commute a sentence, please.
So,
I
Jack,
think
what was your
a
reaction
non-answer.
to that?
Hang on. We're
Okay.
going all sorts of weird directions. Okay, so we end the share.
It's ended.
All right, we're back on. Okay.
So, Dak, just tell me, what was that experience like, and how did you react?
I'd like to say that the last hope for American democracy went out with my feeble whimpering. Please, sir, please show me that you have a little bit of integrity. Please show me that you have a spine. Please, but he refused to do so. I thought it was kind of clever of him, the way that he answered it, where he said, that's a long, I can't get into that right now, as he points to the camera. Like, I want people to pay attention that he's pointing to the camera and saying, I can't get into that. Meaning what? That if I didn't have the camera on me, that you would tell me a lie like Elizabeth Warren did?
So I'm looking at the chat right now. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No,
People
you're good.
say this is BS and they're angry. Go ahead.
Real quick,
What?
this
Shocking.
happened on Sunday, right?
Correct.
And then we immediately find out that he has a weak heart. I'm just saying, like, there's something we can draw metaphorically from that. That I feel that is something the kids at home should take with. I was about as disappointed as I thought I was gonna be. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't floored, because I've seen this non-engagement in Bernie before. I've seen this just complete trepidation to approach a subject that real.
Well, he didn't take any questions. He did not take a single question from the audience, which is why I had no choice but to stick the camera in his face.
And with Bernie Sanders too, the day that Julian Assange got taken out of the embassy, I rescheduled my entire life to go to Washington, D.C. for the protests. Driving home that Saturday evening, Bernie Sanders was giving a speech in Michigan with Abdul Saeed, and they spoke of these grandiose things like justice and rights and all of these wonderful terms that we use nowadays. And not a single peep 2 days after Julian Assange was dragged out of the embassy about him. It took him 44 days to release a tweet that didn't have the man's name in it. Like, he's someone that's willing to do whatever it takes to gain power. And I think at the end of the day, that's something that needs to be recognized, because he's willing to just throw anyone under the bus and say, I support blah, 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 when everyone obviously knows that that person's full of shit. And all that happens is people apologize. And I'm sick of people apologizing for candidates, because at the end of the day, there's no apology that you can say about Bernie Sanders that's going to get Julian Assange out of the prison. There's no apology.
That response on Sunday didn't even hold up to his tweet, which was on May 24th. So, a whole 6 weeks after the man was arrested, he won't say his name. He didn't even retweet a tweet with his name in it.
And if he's not willing,
got him to actually say his name. I mean,
if he's not willing to suffer the media storm right now for saying I support Julian Assange, right? How is he going to withstand the media storm when he says I'm putting all these fucking war criminals in jail? Like, that's what this comes down to: is are these war criminals going to jail or not?
If I may, sorry to cut you off, Andrew. It's just that this is something I want to say to people, is that a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to say to me, well, that was inconclusive, that was ambiguous. Guys, no, it was not. When he said, I can't get into that right now, that was just as pathetic as Cory Booker saying he didn't have time to answer the question because he had to take selfies. Because this is the thing. This is not a question about, like, say, a different approach to healthcare, where there are nuances and disagreements about how to get the job done. I asked very clear questions. do you support Julian Assange? Will you pardon him? Will you commute his sentence? If he says that's a long ... what is it a long? It's a long what? A long explanation for you to like try to distance yourself from Trump's policy while at the same time refusing to support Julian Assange?
Oh, he's gonna have to take
So-
about 44 days to get back to you on that, Dak. That seems to be about the average. In the spirit of that, when we were talking earlier today, we were coming up with the top excuses that we could think of that will immediately arise out of this video. So I don't know if you guys want to roundtable this or how you want to roll the spin the wheel on the excusorama. But
I
Yeah,
prefer to call them TY
nobody-
talking points.
Right. The thing is, though, is that a non-answer, his response to your question was an answer in itself. The fact that he dodged the question
Yes.
and then he said, not right now, that shows that he is, number one, afraid of the DNC, which I said a couple weeks ago on Graham Elwood's show, that he is definitely wanting to pander to them. And if anybody was going to support Julian Assange, you think it would be Bernie Sanders, of course, not just because of his, progressive stance on other issues, but also because, I mean, he revealed that he was being, cheated in the primary.
So as
so
somebody that was watching Vigil for that whole week beforehand, and Unity for J held a vigil all that weekend beforehand, and we knew anytime he's going to get pulled out of the embassy, like we just kept waiting and thinking, who's going to stand up for him? Who is going to stand up for him? And we watched the media slowly disappear from the embassy one by one until one morning when only media there was Rupley waiting, and we saw him emerge blind because he hasn't seen the sunlight in almost 7 years, disheveled because his shaving kit was stolen 3 months beforehand, yelling to resist the Trump administration. This is on a platter for liberals to go after Trump for. This is something that would be so easy to stand up for, and Bernie won't do it.
Because it's
None of them will, besides Tulsi.
It's
you
a
couldn't
long
give
thing you
crap
can't
it
get
better.
into right now.
You couldn't give crap
Wrong.
it better. Gordon Dimmick has made this point about Jeremy Corbyn too. He could be literally beating Boris Johnson over the head with the specter of WikiLeaks every single day. All of these Democratic candidates could be doing the exact same thing to Trump, with the exception of Joe Biden, because he was part of the fucking original secret arrest warrant. But I mean, anyone who is quote unquote progressive or quote unquote democratic socialist or whatever you like, however you want to spin it, man, you have a gift wrapped opportunity to say, if elected, I will defend a free press. I will defend your freedom of speech. I will immediately commute, pardon, whatever, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, Dale Howard, Jeremy Hammond, reality winner, all of these people who are locked up for truth. I will do that. Donald Trump, this fascist maniac, has 18 charges levied against Julian Assange for doing his job as a publisher. And if he is tried and if he is found guilty, all of you, press that is covering this, are subject to the exact same fate if you print one thing the government doesn't like. Whose government is it going to be when you print that? You don't know. But if you step out of line, Espionage Act.
What I want to know, he said now is not the right time to get into it. When is going to be the right time? How many times do we have to be told that Julian Assange's health is deteriorating? Is it when he's dead? in Belmarsh? Is that the right time to decide, oh, maybe I should speak up for free speech? Is it after the US extradition hearing in February 2020 when he's on his way to the US? Is that when he's going to stand up for him? Is it after he gets the nomination? And that brings me to our first excuse that we predict people to make is that we've heard this from other guests on the show. The DNC won't give him the nomination if he defends Julian Assange right now. So in a way, he's avoiding the question until he can secure the nomination. What do you guys think of that?
I hear that excuse from people constantly. The thing is, what people need to understand is that Bernie Sanders has a very consistent record of voting for wars. Bernie Sanders is a warmonger who also parrots war propaganda, militaristic propaganda, imperialist propaganda. He's doing it right now with Venezuela. My stance on this is twofold. The short answer is, if he is in fact trying to play some shady realpolitik game where he evades the answer until he can swoop in and do the right thing, forgive me for not having the confidence in him to vote for him in the meantime. But my second answer is this: if he really is going to continue his warmongering, which seems to be related to his problems with WikiLeaks, then I don't think we as a people really deserve things like the things he's promising, like healthcare. If we're going to allow these foreigners to be murdered by our bombs for no good reason, then maybe we don't deserve universal healthcare. Maybe we don't deserve free college education.
Well, if we have an educated populace, that populace is going to come together and demand an end to the wars. That's
but who's going to educate them? The government schools that Bernie Sanders wants to fund?
I believe that it'll be a mix of that, and you can also go from your Amazon Prime dwelling to your Amazon Prime shuttle service to your Amazon Prime school and or Amazon Prime work. I think that and that's
while we all live off of the $12,000 a year that Andrew
that's Andrew Yang
we have after they take our jobs. I mean,
ever saw Sorry to Bother You? It's a lot like that. You should, and if you haven't seen Sorry to Bother You, go see that fucking movie.
Yeah, it's the ever appealing political philosophy of Homer Simpson. Can't someone else do it? I mean, I'm sick of it. I have no patience with this. Bernie Sanders, like, not that I had a whole lot of faith in the guy anyway, but he snuffed out that candle for me on Sunday afternoon in Plymouth at a college campus, fittingly enough.
And I think that kind of takes us to our next talking point too, which people are going to try to say is that Tulsi Gabbard speaks for Bernie Sanders too, that they're somehow the same candidate with some master plan behind the scenes. And I think that's ridiculous.
Why is there a concerted effort to make excuses for him? Why is that? It's bizarre.
So here's why, and then I'll get into the theory. The reason that people are tripping over their own dicks to make excuses for Bernie Sanders is because they have an emotional attachment to an outcome that is years in the making. And they have transferred this emotional attachment to a future outcome onto a human being. And the pathway to neoliberalism starts with picking a candidate in the Democratic primary for president and then spending the next several years making excuses for every shitty word and action they do. That'll get you defending drone strikes. If you support drone strikes, you support the intelligence behind the drone strikes. Intelligence which is more often than not fabricated. Intelligence which is 100% agenda driven, that is not necessarily the agenda that you ran on. The theory is that at the formation of the Sanders Institute, Tulsi and Bernie huddled for many an hour, hatching this plan to where Tulsi would effectively be his point soldier and say all the things that the media won't let Bernie say. And for starters, the fact that there's a Bernie Sanders who knows that the media won't let him say things, and so he doesn't say them, is an indictment to me. But that's the theory, that Tulsi will then go forth and be Bernie's super secret squirrel voice on foreign policy and free speech, and the where she goes deep in the paint on regime change wars, or calling and all wars are regime change wars, is a bullshit talking point. But calling Trump Saudi Arabia's bitch and shit like that. That's she's really doing it on behalf of Bernie. That's the theory.
Just like Donald Trump was going to defy everyone's political expectations and bring about this pacifistic agenda. Have we really become this weak intellectually that we're saying, yeah, guys, I know they said this, but they're probably going to do the opposite, except this time they're lying as a force for good instead of just lying to get themselves power like the last 45 presidents.
The only
All right, Jack.
pacification that happened under Barack Obama was of left-wing activists. Those are the only people that got pacified under Barack Obama.
But how
So
dismissive of Tulsi is that theory? Like that she is not her own candidate, that
It's
she's somehow
demeaning as fuck.
towing a line for another man who's running for president, and that a woman can't be her own standing candidate and have her own opinions and her own agenda and her own policies. Like this it's completely demeaning to her.
It is. I do
So
want to
we had
bring in some
someone in the
audience
chat.
members from,
Oh.
yeah, I see the question. I do want to bring in some of the people watching on Nico's channel. This is coming from, I can't remember who it is, but they asked, if you believe Bernie Sanders is a warmonger, why did he stop us from continuing to attack Yemen? Why did he vote against the military defense budget, AKA the military industrial complex?
We're still attacking Yemen. We are still funding that genocide, and because Bernie Sanders doesn't vote for military spending bills doesn't mean that he doesn't vote for every single appropriations bill and every single what's the ancillary military funding projects, ancillary fucking approval for actions and incursions. And the military spending bill alone, it isn't where being anti-war starts and stops.
If I may, the claim that Bernie Sanders is a pacifist because he cast his symbolic vote against the war in Yemen, unfortunately, that does nothing to negate his vote in support of the invasion of Afghanistan. It does nothing to negate his support for the bombing of Yugoslavia. And while people point out that he voted against the Iraq War, he later voted to fund it on, I think, at least 2 different occasions. He has supported further bombing throughout the years. This guy is not a pacifist. Just because he doesn't vote for every single war effort does not mean that his overall record is not completely gluttonous on this point. These people need to stop with the frivolous examples.
Right.
And I think a lot of that comes from, I was going to say, a lot of that comes from the fact that independent and progressive media at the time latched onto Bernie Sanders because there was no one else there for them to call out and for them to lean on, which I think is absolutely wrong. Which kind of leads us to our next question, which I'll actually pass over to you, Dak. It's from WebAnt over on the MCSC network. He asked, if not Bernie, then who?
Well, I mean, the candidate that we all go towards here is Tulsi Gabbard, because she has been a consistently vocal supporter of Assange, stating explicitly that she will drop the charges against him and then pardon Edward Snowden. She's also said that Chelsea Manning should not be in jail while this case against Assange is pending. Whether or not, I don't know if she would actually be able to defy all of those intelligence and military agencies once she was in office without going the way of JFK. So I can't say that, but she is the only one whose rhetoric on this point is consistent and clearly identifiable.
So I personally would like to see Ian Schlachman get the Green Party nomination and at least a vocal supportive voice for Julian Assange in the presidential arena. I would like to see Adam Kokesh get the Libertarian nomination. I would like for Ian and Adam to merge into one person who for 72 hours passes all kinds of wonderful like eco-socialist style legislation, and then after 72 hours follows through with Adam's campaign promise to abolish the federal government.
Ian is in our chat right now, so hi, Ian.
Oh
And
shit!
so
Hi, Ian.
I want to bring up the next excuse point. This excuse that we came up with is that Julian was working with Trump and Russia, and or Julian helped Trump win. So why would Bernie defend him, and why would Bernie stand up for him? Because my Russia.
Sometimes I wonder why, like, I know people do, of course, like say that, and it's an excuse we hear often. But at this point, it seems almost like foolish to even be thinking this way, because we know that this has been debunked time and time again. This is more indicative of an issue concerning the fact that people don't have accurate information. And if you're watching independent media and following independent media, you should know that that's an absolute fallacy. But you're right.
It's
People will
very
still bring
alarming
up
to see.
Russia. And I know that Bernie often talks about, Russia too. He very much still subscribes to that whole
It's
narrative.
very alarming to see any of the presidential candidates still bring up the Russiagate issue as if it is fact, and to even be on the debate stage talking like that.
Well,
Yeah,
they now
Dak,
have
when you
Ukraine
asked,
beef too.
yeah,
Like,
Dak,
they
when
now
you
just-
asked Beto, he brought up Russia. Many of the candidates that
he
you have
just brought up the
questioned bring that
election.
up. It's a common theme throughout many of their responses. And again, these are prepared responses to the question about Julian Assange, but they do often use that. And we see it with the candidates, we see it with supporters.
If I can just humiliate Beto O'Rourke for a second, I have a selfie with him on my latest Tulsi Gabbard article, and he's all grins and smiles. And then in the video that was taken about 8 seconds later, you can see how miserable he is, where his heart has sunk into his stomach because he realizes he has to answer a question. But yeah, the promoting of the Russiagate among these people who are supposed to be dignified enough for to hold public office. Yeah, Taylor, it's been Russiagate has been debunked for you and for other people who are actually paying attention and doing their research. But when you have people like I mentioned, that bloated pseudo-intellectual Seth Abramson, who's paid handsomely to promote that nonsense and to keep reviving that corpse over and over again, people are going to be looking to him instead of doing their own work to find out that Russiagate is a gigantic crock.
Are we
So what is
wrapped
also,
with the
go ahead.
excuses? Are we do we have more? I mean, I know I think we got the big major excuse. I know the one that I always hear is well, the media would never let him live it down. And is this the same media that printed 16 negative articles in 16 hours, the same media that attacks Bernie Sanders for every single thing he says or ignores him completely? Are they worried that his treatment in the media would somehow be worse than it has been or it was in 2016? Because that is some weak tea right there. It is again, man, we've February 25th 2020 is the beginning date of Julian Assange's extradition trial. Even with an appeal process, if a candidate hasn't beaten Donald Trump over the head with this issue, that is indicative of what they are going to do when they are in office. And if you're bowing to NatSec even 8 out of 10 times, that is 8 out of 10 times too many.
Because let's be honest, we are seeing the best of the candidates right now. They're putting on their best face during the election season, right? It's not like they're going to get better once they're in office. No, we're seeing the best of them right now. So I think it is kind of foolish too when people are saying, oh, well, he'll do this and he'll you know, do these good things once he's elected or she's elected. That never holds up. And if you look throughout history, that's never how it works.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to vote for these people when they say that they're not going to support Julian Assange. I mean, I get the argument people make where they have to, you know, bite their tongue, but if they are afraid to face the intelligence agencies now, how willing are they going to be to face the intelligence agencies to whom they have lied this whole time on the campaign trail? I mean, that is like putting yourself in much greater jeopardy than if you just say, if you were to just defy them from the very beginning.
Hey, I have a question. I want to answer something from Propaganda right now. He said, at ActionForAssange, but what if Bernie was threatened to stay silent on the cheating and Assange having a direct connection to his, I don't know what, but you know what I would say? I would say
Bernie's life.
Bernie's life. I would say, okay, go ahead and leak it to the media, leak it if it's a
Leak it to
official document,
WikiLeaks.
leak it to WikiLeaks. Exactly.
Leak it to WikiLeaks.
That's our answer.
I would say that then he will be a completely compromised president. And everything that he says on the campaign trail should be immediately suspect if you believe that his life was threatened and he's still allowed to run for president. He's still going, even with the media smear. The guy just had like a $25 million quarter or something like that. He is raking in cash. He's got an army of volunteers. If you believe that he's not addressing these things because he's in a compromised situation, he is always going to be in that compromised situation. That is one of those bells that don't get unrung.
I want to say something about people. You guys mentioned leak it to WikiLeaks. I just want to. It's not really neither here nor there. But on this, throughout my work doing this, I've encountered a lot of people who are not big fans of WikiLeaks, and I met up in the Coos County Democratic Fair in Lancaster, I believe, this man who told me that he was very frustrated that WikiLeaks has not published anything on Russia within the last 5 years. To which I said to him, sir, do you have confidential information on the Russian government? If so, release it to WikiLeaks. And he said to me, he actually said this to me, a grown man said, well, my friends have some of Vladimir Putin's private emails that show how corrupt he is. And I said, then give them to WikiLeaks. They have, but WikiLeaks has denied them. So why don't they go give it to an American media company like CNN? It's like, you are a grown man and you're lying to me. You're just making up this story in the hopes that it's going to make me say, oh, you know what? I think that's a really good argument. I should be on your side. Like, how stupid are you, sir? And you sit on the board of a regional Democratic party, like a charter. I mean, this is embarrassing, but this is the horror that I've seen out there on the campaign trail.
So we have a question from Brian Crosby, and he said, what can Tulsi do that Bernie can't? Since apparently you guys can't stand Bernie, what can she do? It's not that we can't stand Bernie, but we are very frustrated and unbelievably, and I can speak for myself here, unbelievably displeased with his response about Julian Assange. And nobody is going to get a free pass. And we think that every leader should be held accountable. I said earlier, a couple episodes ago, that we have no allegiance to any candidate. Our allegiance is to Julian Assange and to the whistleblowers, the journalists, real journalists, and the activists, not any particular candidate. And we will be equally critical of them all.
And just to kind of give my personal story about supporting Bernie Sanders, I have the action figures. I have all the bumper stickers. I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my wife, my 1-year-old, and my 3-year-old at the time. I was picking which bills I didn't want to pay so I could donate an extra $25 a month to Bernie Sanders because I believed in him. When the DNC emails came out and the Podesta emails came out leading up to the actual convention itself, I read all of them. As they were being released, I was talking about this earlier in the pre-stream, I was in training at the new job that I had, and I was reading all of the emails in real time. I was participating in the Reddit threads. And then Bernie Sanders didn't say anything. Bernie Sanders didn't address the corruption. Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned, and that was supposed to be the end of it. And that corruption still hasn't been addressed. The fact that you still have the Center for American Progress working hand in hand with the Democratic Party and the mainstream media to create fake narratives all the time so they don't have to address other problems. And Bernie Sanders goes right along with it and says, oh, yep, it was the Russians that made a meme about me. It's just bullshit. Like the fact that we have known since the very beginning that Russiagate was bullshit. Russiagate's been used to censor everything that the left-wing media has tried to put out. Left-wing activist pages have been removed. And the whole time, Bernie Sanders just kept pushing the narrative. He gave a speech on the floor of the Senate screaming about President Trump and Russia. And all that was just telling the CIA, hey, I'm your guy. Like, I'll give you whatever the fuck you want. Just let me come in here and redefine what a right is, from something that the people are protected from by the government to something that they're given. And I think that's a very distinct thing. Like pushing Russiagate that hard when all of your supporters know that you were wrong shouldn't be acceptable. That should just write you off in the very beginning. And that's something that people just never hold anyone accountable for, where we'll make fun of Rachel Maddows and the Cory Bookers and the Kamala Harrises of the world for saying, but Russia. But when Bernie Sanders screams at the top of his lungs, he gets a free pass because he wants to be the presidential nominee. He's playing the same game of power with Kamala Harris and using the same talking points to censor left-wing media and push WikiLeaks out of the circle.
And at that rally where I filmed him, he did bring up the Russiagate stuff towards the end of his speech. So that was disappointing. We have a question here from an Ashford Marrero, who says, dude needs to answer the follow-up questions. He liberally said Tulsi over Bernie. I guess I'm the aforementioned dude. How do you expect Tulsi to handle Medicare for all, student debt, health debt, wealth tax? Come on, really? Okay, pleased to meet you, Ashford. This is not the vigil for Medicare for all. This is not the vigil for student debt, health debt, or the wealth tax, even though Tulsi has come out in support of Medicare for all. Apparently you missed the memo somewhere. So yeah, we can have that discussion on their domestic policies at a different time. This is not about any of those questions, so I suggest you read the title of the video. Thank you for playing.
And look, for at least for me, I tell people on my own show, and if you're just seeing me for the first time, my name's Steve Boykin, and I have a show on YouTube called Slow News Day. I interview actual independent journalists and do not cover the political horse race, because you shouldn't have political heroes. Politicians aren't heroes. Whistleblowers and truth tellers, heroes. So if we're critical of politicians, it's because they know, like we know, that we live in a rigged system inside a duopoly. They know, like we know, that NatSec and global intelligence write their legislation and direct the show. And so if it seems like we're treating politicians like they're cynical, disingenuous pawns, it's because they're cynical, disingenuous pawns.
So we have a question. We have a question coming from Soraya, and this is for everybody, I believe. Do you think if every candidate, and Dak, you could go first. Do you think if every candidate was asked about Assange once or twice a day and their negative responses resulted in disappointed but respectful reaction, would they change their position? I think that if we did hold them to account on this issue and we did question them more, some people may evolve. We've seen this with Marianne Williamson. She has slightly evolved her stance. Of course, she's not near where I'd like her to be. But Jimmy Dore questioned her, and he consistently and persistently challenged her when she was just spewing out these, Democratic mainstream media talking points when asked about Julian Assange. And he basically called her out and said, what you're saying is not true. Once she was asked again by our guest, Dak Rouleau, I think exactly 3 months later, she did have a much more, that's loud, sorry. She did have a much more, a much better response, I'd say. And you could see that there was some progress there. So Dak, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, the reason she was showing progress was because she was staring at me, and when it appeared that she was leaning towards forgiving him or pardoning him, I started like nodding my head, like, yeah, keep going. So I had to basically stick the spoon halfway down her throat before she figured out how to bite. But the problem is that yeah, these candidates would care if this affected their polling one bit, which is why I don't think Bernie cares about this, because even though this will result in the people who actually care about Julian Assange turning away from him, I hope, it's not going to affect his polling numbers at all. He's still going to be where he was 24 hours ago. So yeah, if their polling numbers were to get really wounded because they kept getting harassed on the Assange question, then yeah, they would change their stance. And then the government would have to change its stance because it realizes that, oh, we have people who actually participate in their freaking democracy and civic organization. But we don't have that here in this anti-society in which we're forced to live. So yeah, we're forced to live by our own design. So yeah, until enough people actually care, the candidates aren't going to have a reason to care. This is a fringe issue to them, the First Amendment.
Yeah, so Dak, we are going to be wrapping up here shortly, but before we do that, I would like again to thank you for coming on, and you are welcome to stay as we discuss the news if you would like. But I do want to thank you again for your work and for your good journalism and for working alongside me on my article. I don't appreciate the New York Times reference. I'm kidding, of course. I'm kidding, of course. It's a joke,
well,
but.
No, I want to thank all of you for having me on. I want to thank.
Real quick. No, you really do a great job. And I thank you so much for being willing to share the information with me and being, a main source for my work. I'm really grateful. And you are a beautiful, beautiful writer. I come from a writing background myself. So I can tell when somebody is very talented, and you are certainly a talented writer and journalist. So thank you so much for coming on. If you do want to give some final thoughts, some final statements here, and then also let everybody know where they can find you on social media and let them know about your website.
Yeah, no, I want to say thank you to all of you guys, because this is what I'm talking about. This is the encouraging side of it. This is the reward for the work that I've done, is seeing that there are other people who actually, feel the same way and are serious about it. And it does it shows that there is some value to what we are all doing here. The thing is that whenever people say to me on Twitter or whatever, they say, thank you for asking the candidates about this. What I always say to them is, you should thank Julian Assange, because me going out there and asking these candidates is the least that I can do to thank Assange for all of the work he did to keep us all informed. I will never forget that interview he did with ActionForAssange, in which he explained in full detail how the DNC screwed over Bernie Sanders, who was the reason we're here tonight, and yet can't even show his basic acknowledgement of Assange's plight. So the one thing I just want to say is this, that we talk about this as a vigil for Assange. I am really worried about what is going to happen to our, not just to Assange, but to our culture and our society if he is prosecuted and locked away, because we will lose such a part of our spirit in that prosecution that I don't know if we can recover from that. What I go back to is Victor Hugo wrote in The Hunchback of Notre Dame about what happened after the death of Quasimodo. And I'm sorry to compare Assange to Quasimodo, but I think the quote is fitting. He says, Notre Dame without Quasimodo is like a skull. The sockets that held the eyes are still there, but the gaze is gone. And to me, that is what will become of our society if we kill Assange. The same way that we killed Socrates, the same way that we killed Jesus. It's not something that we are going to recover from. It will tarnish us in a way that we'll still be dealing with that wound forever. So let's not inflict any more wounds upon ourselves or upon Assange. Let's do the right thing here.
Yeah, you're right. Did you plug in and let everybody know where they could find you? Let them know on Twitter and
sorry. No, I did not.
No, don't be sorry.
No, yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dak Rouleau. I'm the only person in the world with that name, so the spelling can be kind of weird, but maybe in the description here it appears. And then my website is overwritten.org. That's a little bit easier to do. And there's my Twitter contact information on there. And who knows, if you go to a presidential rally in New Hampshire, you just might see me with getting ready to ask a question about Assange. So that's where you find me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dak. We really appreciate your being here, and you are welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, so we are going to move on to some news now. There is quite a bit of material to cover this evening as far as news stories and updates. We're trying to, figure out exactly where to begin, probably with Belmarsh. So I will hand this off to Steve to kind of dive in here.
All right, so September 28th was a worldwide rally that was centered around the one that took place at Belmarsh, the prison where Julian Assange is being held. We do have, oh no, that's the MP thing. Gordon Dimick, friend of this show and friend of my show, was there. He's got some great videos on his channel for it. I think he said there were upwards of 150, 200 people there that attended. While that happened, while that took place, which will, I think we have do we have the website? There were sister or solidarity, Andrew's favorite word, rallies a number of cities, and I may not get them all, so if I don't, I'm sorry, but Sydney, Melbourne, Mexico City, and then New York, Denver, San Francisco. I'm sure I'm missing a couple. Christy, do you know?
Adelaide also was there. They did a Sunday event.
Belgium, I believe Germany had an event as well.
Yeah, Germany had an event. So yeah, there was about 11, 12 cities that I think met over the weekend for global action in solidarity action with Belmarsh. And Brisbane, yes. And so yeah, John Shipton received the Gavin McFadden Award on behalf of Julian Assange, and there was also a rally following that as well.
And so with John Shipton, Julian's dad, accepting the award, who was the award from?
It was the Gavin McFadden Award.
Gavin McFadden.
Yeah. And so John Shipton also, he did a press conference in Germany today and did a speech. So he is now moved to the UK, and he had said on one of his previous visits with Julian Assange, his son, that Julian asked him to come to the UK to kind of help represent him. And he's really been doing that. He is slated to go to Dublin, Ireland on October 11th for an event with Claire Daly and Mick Wallace. So yeah, he is kind of cruising around and making appearances and really kind of stepping up that just some more focus on Julian in Europe in general.
I believe his father also moved to, I don't think we mentioned this, I believe his father moved to London to be closer to him as well, which is a really positive thing, I think, that probably, helps him while he, is there. I know it's probably not a whole lot of help, but it's a good thing that his father was fortunately able to make his way up there. It makes visiting easier, even though it really isn't that easy, to visit him in the prison. But yeah, there was some really important events, and looking ahead, there are some more, and we'll get to that later on in the stream. Go ahead, Steve.
I was gonna say, from what I understand, Julian was aware that there was a rally going on outside for him, and in fact, they took him a different route on the way back so that he couldn't see it a second time. Because that's how, that's how they're treating Julian Assange, and that's why we're doing this thing. I wanted to I don't know if there's I'll go dig it up real quick if not, but if the article out of El País that talks about the Spanish security firm that was live streaming embassy footage to the CIA, the pretty much the entire time that Julian Assange was in it, um that's something that has people rightfully hot, and I know that the story is a couple of days old, but I don't think that we live in such a rabbit-brained mindset here in this community that we can't discuss the implications of what this means, what how much of a gross violation of every single civil, human, international, constitutional right. It's absolutely disgusting and something that we had all been talking about as a community of people throughout um oh I mean years about that they're spying on him, that it was just assumed, and we have proof now, and there's again crickets from international media on
Yeah, so
this.
we
And it's
have
by
this
Like,
design.
this
I was just
Spanish
gonna,
security company that was giving information to the CIA. We had heard stories before that they would go, Julian, his lawyers, and he guessed they would oftentimes go into the women's bathroom to have conversations in hopes that they could speak privately. And then we found out from this article that there was actually a microphone in the women's restroom. So I think that kind of creeped out any of the women who either A, worked there or visited him while he was at the embassy. I mean, we're talking about every nook and cranny of the embassy, inside and out, was being examined by microphones and cameras. And we see the media just sort of continue this. Oh, he was just paranoid. Oh, the U.S. really isn't after him. Well, why did the UK spend gobs of millions of dollars and pounds on this type of security? Like, what? I don't really understand what an excuse people could make for this anymore.
Right, there is no excuse to be made for this, and I think what's even more telling as well is the fact that this shows that we live in a U.S. empire dominated world, of course, and we know that. But the fact that the Ecuadorian officials who were hired by the then president at that time, I believe it was Rafael Correa, this is Morales, I believe, was the one who was really involved with this over surveillance, was willing to work with the United States. And he was even telling people to keep it a secret. He didn't want it to get out, but he seemed to be proud that he was working with the United States intelligence. And it is really disturbing that we can have this sort of power over these other countries. And then, of course, a single person is being dramatically impacted by this. And there's not the media, who should be really at the forefront of this and bringing awareness and exposure to this, is failing to do so.
Oh, sorry.
and
I
sorry, and it's an intentional failing. Like, it's these people, they are paid to be silent. And it's even in independent media, you don't see anyone picking up these stories. You don't see anyone covering what's happening with Julian Assange. And there's stuff coming out every single week, which is why we try to get these, which is why we do these vigils every week, is to get that information out to people. So it's not even just the mainstream media that isn't covering this. It is independent media. It is the alternative media sources. It's everyone from TYT to Jamal Thomas to even right-wing sources like the Corbett Report. They're not talking about Julian Assange. And I'm not saying it's coordinated or strategic in any way, but it's one of those things that everyone's just fallen silent. And we really need to keep that voice big and keep it going. So that way, when they do go to try to make that next move in February, we have people in place to respond in kind. And I think that's something that's really important, is we are in an era of global tyranny. And the only option is for us to act individually to solve this, because the moment we try to pull everything into a big group, all the CIA and FBI agents show up. But if it's you and a couple of your friends, or just you out putting up signs, passing out flyers, talking to your community, that's how you can make the difference, because you can't be infiltrated, you can't be demoralized. If you're literally just walking around hanging up signs, it eventually turns into the point where you just say, wow, that would be a really cool place to try to get a sign up on. So the more we act and spread this message, the more it actually becomes important to the rest of the country.
And
So
we have,
while-
I mean, we've hit up, pretty much everyone that we could think of in progressive media. And because of scheduling and whatnot, like there are still people that, we'll be bringing onto the show that we haven't had on yet. But if you're noticing a particular lack of a content creator or two, it's not for lack of trying. I can promise you that much. And with that said, one more time, I'd like to thank Jason Carney and people in 99% for streaming this on their Facebook channel. Nico House is streaming this on his channel, and Anonymous Bites Back is streaming this on their channel. So big thanks to those folks. We really appreciate it. And yeah, Christy,
Yeah.
you want
So
to...
while we were kind of in the vein of talking about the spying that happened in the embassy, I want to bring up that today in Quito, Ecuador, there was actually a private hearing where Ecuador was supposed to be giving up hardware devices from the embassy to U.S., basically into U.S. custody. So if you remember a few months back when Christian Hofferson was in London trying to go to the embassy to get his basically WikiLeaks materials, equipment, trying to get back in there, and they refused to allow him in, and really get any access to Julian Assange's possessions. So now here we're having some movement on these devices. We're told there's hardware, hard drives, excuse me, maybe some phones. Not quite sure. We have a lot of details on this. But what do you guys think about this, as far as, do you think there are anything on there that the US can really use, or that they might try to plant and accuse Assange of having to introduce more charges?
See, I think he is too intelligent to allow something to be on his servers and on his electronics. So if we do find something, or if the police or whoever's investigating this does find something, I absolutely believe that it's planted there. And that is not being a conspiracy theorist. They do this, investigate police.
Oh, stream went down.
Yeah, our internet is still down. We are back now, though, as soon as that little bit ended.
All right.
Right?
Man,
Well,
we've been getting the treatment tonight. I'd like to take this opportunity to say hello to the NSA agent that is tasked with monitoring the stream.
Hey.
I hope by the end of this we have.
We still need a nickname for him.
Yeah,
man,
we do.
Yeah. Hey, chat crew, please help us name our NSA agent.
What's your favorite NSA?
Oh,
Free ActionForAssange wristband to the winner.
Yeah, you can get one of these.
Can you guys tell us if we
ActionForAssange.
are? Can the chat tell us if we are up?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm not seeing it up.
We're glitching.
It says we're up.
But yeah, it says we're up.
Yeah, no, we spike up to like 620-ish kilobyte or megabytes per second, and then it just cuts us out at the knees and drops us back down to 25, and I pay for like 250. So it's fun watching how they fuck with everything. But
Can I reiterate that point though? If it went down and they couldn't hear it, just because I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so basically what we were talking about was if we think that Assange has anything to worry about as far as his electronics and his servers being confiscated. And I think all of us agree on this, and we say that we do not think that there's anything on there that they are going to find, because Assange is very careful and he's extremely intelligent. He wouldn't be as careless as to leave vital information on these electronics. His main priority has always been to protect his sources and his information, and to be very, again, protective and secretive when it comes to an upcoming leak, and that's just good journalism. So I do not think at all that there's something on there. However, I do think there is a potential and possibility for investigators to be planting evidence on those devices. And that is not being a conspiracy theorist at all, because this happens all the time. It really
Right.
does.
Like
Investigators do
17
this
intelligence-
frequently.
We knew that there was a chance he was going to be arrested because Assange himself knew he was going to be arrested and had told people that when he was starting to get visitors in those last few weeks, that's what he feared. So I really think you're right, Taylor. I don't think he would have allowed anything to be remaining on these devices. And if there is anything that comes out as some big spoiler of information that the US draws up from this, I think it's going to be very well planted from the US.
Yeah, it's like how 17 intelligence agencies were mildly confident that Russia did something. And it was all based on a report from the DNC giving a private corporation their servers, that corporation taking an image, destroying the servers, redacting the report, and turning it over to the United States government. So if it's handled anything like the Russia investigation, we'll know it's basically complete bullshit.
So we do have Dak is back with us. So Dak, if you want to join, yeah, feel free to jump in. We're just talking about the latest news with Julian Assange. I just wanted to let him know that.
Yeah, I was listening in. I had to go get a little bit of air, but thank you for having me back.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
So
Snowden.
we're going to, in light of talking about how severely surveilled Julian Assange was in the embassy, and this is something that if you haven't been, please Sunday evenings watch Susie Dawson's series, One versus Five Eyes. It's like, you know, night school for learning about how incredibly pervasive the reach and power of intelligence agencies are. It's a fantastic series, and man, it really brings home the point that the level of targeted surveillance that takes place for activists globally is insane, and something that we should think about from time to time. And in October, the last 2 weeks of October, we're going to be joined by Sean O'Brien, who was the co-founder of the Yale Privacy Lab. He was on an excellent Unity for JVigil. It was one of those marathon ones. And he will be talking with us about how to secure our devices as best as humanly possible. This is
What's really,
good time
and
to plug encrypted communications between you and your loved ones. We recommend Signal and Wire. If Andrew keeps recommending the Tor browser, I'm going to set his mustache on fire. I think that I want to, because I live in the Santa Cruz Mountains. It's fairly close to Silicon Valley. I want to find like libertarian tech bro who will trade work on his house for building me like a Linux based that's completely or as safe as humanly possible, and I'll have a homemade laptop that can withstand the best of what they're throwing at all of us.
so what I wanted to say too, and I think this I know this goes for at least New Zealand too, as far as the surveillance. It's not just journalists and activists who are being surveilled. It's also abuse victims who are being spied on, as well as insurance claimants. So it's everybody, and the scope of who is being targeted and surveilled is just going to broaden as time goes on. And we've seen within the past 20 years too, this increase rapidly. And it's very, very frightening.
Edward
And
Snowden.
it's unfortunate that not many people are aware of this. Go ahead, Christy.
I was just going to Edward Snowden's tweet again in light of what you're saying, that it's no longer on if you are on a list, it's now how far up the list you're on. So this, yes, like what Taylor said, it goes for
Yeah,
everybody.
phones and ask some questions that are not approved. How far are they going to be to get where this restriction on giving people any kind of electronic freedom, even though we live in this increasingly electronic world. I mean, I know I have, back when I wrote fiction, I know I have things on old laptops that I'm sure were uploaded to Microsoft's cloud that would make me look like a strange, like a mentally unhealthy person just because of the nature of the content. And that can be used against you at some point in the future, if not in a court of law, in some kind of public relations campaign to smear you, like we see with Assange.
And they do that with absolutely anybody, and they'll do it for absolutely any reason. Like, all someone has to do, and Bernie Sanders is the best example of this with his silence, is break the narrative and step out of what the National Security Agency is comfortable with what you're saying, and they're just going to execute you, like, whether it's politically, whether it's physically, or whether it's through your personality and attacks like that. People just get obliterated when anything like this happens. And it's a trend that's across the media for any kind of dissident, whether you're a whistleblower in the environmental world, whether you're someone fighting against ICE, or you're someone standing up against war crimes. You get blatantly drug over the fire trying to destroy your name because the thing you said was truthful.
Well, when you have government officials calling WikiLeaks a non-state terrorist, foreign terrorist organization, I mean, that has a trickle-down effect. I mean, we kind of joke about that we're just normal people doing this vigil every week, but what does that make us? What does that make the people in the chat? What does that make everybody on Twitter that, uses the hashtag free Assange? So eventually everybody's going to get grouped up into these weird government classifications as something dangerous.
Every single person in this chat is being spied upon, 100%. There is a file. You don't have like 24 hours. It's a team of agents surveilling all of us. But yes, every single person being in this group would be considered potentially dangerous at the very least.
If you have liked or commented in support of Julian Assange or Chelsea Manning or any number of historical figures or other people who operate outside of the narrative, that is flagged. Now, as Dak was just saying, that doesn't mean that you're assigned surveillance, but the further you get, into your activism, the likelihood of you at some point encountering surveillance that you can detect, or someone that you can recognize as an agent, that increases significantly. I have a couple of different reasons to have a file. I was joking about it with my wife the other day. But I spent a lot of time in concerts and in concert parking lots, traveling around the country with a specific band or two, and that'll get you an FBI file pretty quick. I first got my head split open by the police at the WTO protests in 1994. I've been at this shit for a little bit. So this is something that I go into completely eyes open, and
so I do want to.
I'm happy to do it because there just aren't enough of us, and if we can promote decentralized activism enough on this show, and if we can get to the point where, as Dak said, we become irrelevant, that's a successful project.
That's literally the goal of everything that Action for Assange does. And I promise we'll get to you in a second, Taylor.
Yeah, we have a really important question from someone. I do want to get to that. So when you're done, Andrew, we need to
go ahead.
address what they asked because they don't watch our stream. Okay, thank you. So this is a little off topic, but we have had some really good videos on this. They are asking us specifically at Action for Assange. This is from Ashford, someone. I can't remember the last name last name. But anyways, they're asking, do we get to see the Julian Assange trial, or is everything done in a closed courthouse BS legal mumbo jumbo? We do not get to see Julian Assange's trial. We do not.
Right.
That's a imperative point that we hone in on time after time on this vigil. We will not get to see any of the court proceedings. We will not have access to any of that information, and that's because it is a national security case, and he will be subjected to SIPA, and basically even the jury can't hear the evidence. Media, of course, can't be there, and Julian won't even be able to communicate with his attorneys in private, and much of his own evidence won't be able to be brought into court. We have an entire video about this. It is very, very interesting. We interviewed John Kiriakou, who was tried in the Eastern District Court of Virginia, which is the same court that is charging Julian Assange, and where his case will be heard if he is extradited. Many other whistleblowers have also been tried in that court, and it's called the espionage court because anybody who has been charged with espionage in that court has been convicted. So we have an entire video on that. It is very interesting, and I will put it in the chat. I'll link to it so you guys can check it out after the stream. And I'll open it up to my co-host to add more to that. But do you see why I wanted to get to that question?
Yes.
This is
okay. Thank you.
This is the same general area where Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond are now being held. They're kind of gathering all the people that they either missed or still have in custody related to earlier drops from WikiLeaks, and bringing them all over to the Eastern District of Virginia. The jury will be comprised of people who are related to or closely associated with members of the intelligence community. As Taylor was saying, and as John Kiriakou has said, the Assange's defense team won't be allowed access to the evidence being used against him. This will all be done in the dark. There will only be whatever leaks the judge wants to provide, which she has done historically, and they will all be spun however she wants to spin them.
And it's worth noting too that that judge typically saves or somehow nabs these cases. So it's the same judge that has been doing all of these espionage cases in the Eastern District of Virginia.
And let's not forget, as Chris Hedges observed, that by the time he, quote, shuffles into court, he will have likely gone through so much psychological torture that he will be effectively useless in preparing his own defense anyway, even if he did have materials. That's the part of the story that I don't really like to talk about too much because it makes me nauseous. But that is
we're already seeing that. We're already seeing that. John Shipton, his dad, has talked to him numerous times, and even today has said he's suffering from anxiety. He's lost significant amount of weight. He's still in the healthcare ward in Belmarsh, but
it'll get 10 times worse over here in the American Empire. It'll be far more significant, far more sophisticated, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, we know what Chelsea Manning went through in her trial in 2013, and so I'm imagining we'll expect the same, if not worse, for Julian.
I want to make a point though that hopefully like brings a little lift to what we're talking about. The wonderful thing about Julian Assange, about WikiLeaks, about Chelsea Manning, about Jeremy Hammond, if you look one source away from the official talking points, you have almost immediate and unfettered access to the reality of the situation. It is incredibly easy to debunk all of the Assange smears. Caitlin Johnstone did a brilliant article of that title that you should all read if you haven't. But it is one of those things that is just so undeniably eye-opening if you take an approach of, or if you can convince someone to take the approach of, Have you ever tried reading the website?
Hmm.
Have you ever looked at a story that wasn't written by an outlet that's owned by one of 6 corporations?
Have you ever Googled something in WikiLeaks? Not Googled,
Yeah.
but have you ever used the search
Yeah.
function in WikiLeaks? Because you can find anything and it's fun. Like to go in there and just type in a politician's name and see what pops up is one of the greatest things, or someone involved in business or a corporation or a country, because there's leaks on absolutely everybody. But do we want to get into talk about Snowden's book and how he kind of portrayed Assange in that? Do we want to move on to that part now?
Yes. I was reading a little bit of the it was on Mint Press News, the article that came out wherein Snowden was. Yes, and I don't pretend to know Assange personally, so I don't. I'm not going to say that he's never had a character flaw in his entire life, but at the same time, Snowden's fascination with Assange's character is interesting, to say the least. When Assange had his last appearance on Bill Maher's show, the last time he did free work for Bill Maher before he sold him out, Assange suggested that Snowden had become more vocally critical of WikiLeaks in an attempt to get a pardon from then President Obama. That can't be the influence here, because there's no way that Donald Trump would use a presidential pardon on him. He's too busy pardoning real patriots like Joe Arpaio. But at the same time, I don't know why Snowden feels the need. Yeah, that was sarcasm. I don't know why he feels the need to harp on that point when the work that WikiLeaks is doing is, by his own admission, the more relevant factor here.
So I can't I can't claim to know the inner working of Ed Snowden's mind. I can't. But it comes across, especially in that Mint Press article and the excerpts that they printed, and I don't know if that's the totality of it either. But from those snippets and from what Ed has said in regards to Julian Assange over the last few years, it reeks of self-preservation.
Mhm.
And you're right, it's not like Donald Trump is going to pardon him, but it's not like Donald Trump is going to be president forever. It's not like he can't sit and run a couple of companies out of Moscow and do a TYT interview, or beam in to a mainstream outlet and give an interview. And he
And might I just quickly add this? I mentioned earlier meeting a lot of anti-WikiLeaks Democrats out there on the campaign.
Say for that fantastic little advertisement there to remind us they're here. But back to where you were at, Dak. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Just on the campaign trail, I met quite a few people who had said that Democrats who said that they supported Snowden, but they did not support Assange. I'm guessing it's because the whole conflict has been reduced to the DNC leaks of 2016, and going up against Hillary Clinton somehow makes Assange persona non grata for the rest of his life. Publishing detrimental information about Hillary Clinton apparently is enough to warrant you a life sentence in these people's creative moral imaginations.
Well, that was the cardinal sin that Tulsi Gabbard committed, was stepping down as DNC vice chair and pointing to she didn't even use the word rigged, but pointing to the debate schedule as unfair, or however she put it. That was it, man. She got a letter from like 40 Democrats bitching her out about her. It was wild. No, if you go against the machine, there's a price to pay, and people like Seth Rich have paid the ultimate price for that. But
So there is something in this article I thought was a little interesting, more towards the second half
You wanna
is,
pull it up? I'll pull it up.
sure. So I have not read Ed Snowden's book quite yet, but there is a point that he's trying to make almost a division between Sarah Harrison and WikiLeaks, and I thought that was very interesting.
I
And
agree with you.
trying to make so if you don't know, Sarah Harrison went to be in person with Ed Snowden after WikiLeaks decided to help him get to a safe location. She really sacrificed a lot. I don't think she was able to go back to London after that. I think she's been in Berlin and other parts of Europe since then. And so there are parts apparently of Ed Snowden's book where he tries to almost paint a picture of her being almost a renegade against the WikiLeaks, even though WikiLeaks as an internal structure worked together to move Ed Snowden. And initially they were trying to get him to Latin America, but he ended up stopping and being stopped in Moscow. So I thought that was very interesting that there was, it felt like a wedge was trying to be driven between Sarah and WikiLeaks, and not sure where that's coming from or the benefit of that.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed that too. Again, like Christy, I have not read the book, but I've read the Mint Press article, and the author of that article clearly points to there being a division between the two, or at least Snowden trying to create a division between the two. And Sarah Harrison was not able to return back to London after that because of Schedule 7, a terrorism a piece of legislation that her attorneys advised her that it was in her best interest to not return, because she would therefore be subjected to questioning where she would have to answer questions that she obviously would not want to answer. So she did risk a lot. But he is, I guess, very, thankful for her, and he expresses that in the book. And of course, he should be. I mean, she basically, saved his life, you could say. But he does, try to create that division. And he also, according to the article, he also mischaracterizes Assange as well. Even it goes back to the precise like online names. And you could read it for yourself to really get into that. It's very interesting. But he does try to kind of, mischaracterize that. And then also, I think he does provide some misinformation about leaking in particular that I thought was interesting, or at least like who has the authority to tell the public what they should and should not know. Assange and WikiLeaks believe that it's the whistleblower and it's up to them, whereas Snowden was more on the side of it's up to the journalist to decide what the public has the right to see.
And that distinction was mentioned also on that. I've watched that last interview between Bill Maher and Julian Assange many times, where Bill Maher pointed out that Snowden's thing was more about privacy and Assange's was more about transparency, and those two are kind of at loggerheads, which is actually an interesting point. It's probably the only intelligent thing Bill Maher ever said. But Assange pointed something else out that's relevant, which is that Edward Snowden published one piece of information, which was obviously extremely important for all of us to know about, but he has not published anything since then. So I don't know that he should be seen as the ultimate final authority on this. And furthermore, the people who cite Snowden in order to defame Assange, they were not particularly supportive of Snowden back in the day when he first released his information either. It's only now that he can be used as a weapon against Assange that suddenly everybody is in love with Snowden.
And I'll say this real quick too. There has been a direct and coordinated effort to pit Julian Assange and Edward Snowden against each other, and the people that are more comfortable supporting Ed Snowden against the people who are supportive of Julian Assange, certainly, but of transparency specifically.
See,
And I
this
think
spun a
something
few different
too.
ways too. This imaginary feud between Julian and Ed Snowden. We've seen it kind of go both ways. I think the QAnon narrative is painting Snowden as some sort of traitor and Julian the hero.
He's an
And then
angel.
we get the opposite. So there's lots of different moving parts on trying to make this more than it is.
And I think The Intercept also locked away the rest of the Snowden records. I think they released some, they wrote some articles, and then said, well, the public doesn't need to see the rest of this. So there's millions upon millions of pieces of information revealed by Edward Snowden that have never actually been revealed. And I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that I think it was Glenn Greenwald's The Intercept, has actually stopped their release of articles citing storage problems. I have a Google Drive. You can store the information in there. I'd like to open it up to The Intercept if they want to find a
I
Yeah,
place
think
well,
to
it's
host
important
it.
to mention.
the Intercept's attempt to depict themselves as to remain as an independent source of journalism is getting just a little bit old. It's obvious that they're trying to go the way of the Young Turks to be an even more pseudo-intellectual version of that. They had some good stuff back in the day.
Pierre Omidyar's always been shady, and James Risen, at least the last several years, has just been turning out garbage piece after garbage piece.
I was actually about to bring him up about the whole Russiagate thing, and now he's pivoted onto the Ukraine gate
Ukraine
thing.
thing, and it's fucking ridiculous because his whole thing was, oh, I spun it a completely different way when it broke down, and nobody believed my propaganda back then. But look, read my propaganda now. It will codify whatever bias you may currently have about this situation. So let's resurface this piece of garbage propaganda and present it as James Risen is fucking Kreskin. No, man, and well, 3 sources now have been burned because of that guy.
So I want to make, before we do move on here, I do want to say, though, it's important to remember that if that information, the Snowden documents, say if he were to leak to WikiLeaks in full that information, we would have had access to. Move on. I'm sorry, I just had to. I just wanted to address that.
Do we
before
want to talk about the newfound love for whistleblowers in the mainstream?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that
Well,
kind
we're
of
talking about
transitions well with
whistleblowers.
Gate.
So look, real quick, I want to echo and repeat myself, but echo Caitlin Johnstone's article. If you work for the CIA, and the thing that you're blowing the whistle on is not the crimes committed by the CIA, you're not
doing
a
it wrong.
whistleblower. Huh?
I was going to say you're doing it wrong.
You're not a whistleblower. You are an agent who is doing their job for the CIA, attached to the White House in a coveted rotation.
Yeah, you just fucking blow, basically. The Ukraine Gate scandal is an attempt to put a defibrillator to Joe Biden's cadaver of a campaign, because it allows us to see poor Joe as the victim in Trump's nefarious mustache twirling with Mr. Zelensky. But what the brain-dead American media fails to point out is that good old Joe threatened to withhold $1 billion in aid to the Ukrainian government unless they fired the general prosecutor for reasons unknown. So I don't understand how anybody thinks that, oh, Trump didn't collude with Russia, but this time we got him with the Ukraine business. I mean, he's going to be colluding with my friggin' condo association before his term is up. I mean, it is just the way they keep shrinking their standards over and over again. It is freaking humiliating.
And Joe Biden just fucking brags about it. He's like, yeah, I told him, if you don't fucking fire that guy, we're not paying you $1 billion and I leave in 6 hours.
Yeah.
Call the president.
I hope Trump did threaten to withhold the $450 million in military aid. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we did not give military aid at all? That would be a step in the right direction.
A regime started with neo-Nazis. Like, I think that's the big thing to point out there too, is the Ukrainian government was founded by a neo-Nazi uprising in Ukraine.
That we funded.
The Obama administration funded them.
That we funded.
Yep.
So to rein this back in just a little bit, what we're seeing now are these Democrats, people on the left, who now suddenly are standing for whistleblowers and really want whistleblowers to be treated well in America. And as we all know, because we've been watching this for so long, that is a complete double standard.
It's only when it suits them, when they like what they have blown or who they have blown the whistle on or whatever they are revealing, then they want to support them and favor them, of course. But it should go both ways. You should support whistleblowers no matter what they're revealing. This again goes back to this tribalism we have in this country and how we're so attached to political parties and political identities to the point where we can't stomach to hear information that may go against our own candidates that we may have once favored or our own political party that we identify with. That's a real problem, and we are not going to progress as a country if we cling to this. So I hope to see more people be able to kind of open themselves up, and I think that we may be able to do that. I hope, Dak, with what you revealed, because I think people are disappointed about.
And to throw
Bernie.
a really hard dissenting opinion in here, I don't think the answer to the problems that we're facing is a Council on Foreign Relations member. That's a really controversial thing to say, but I don't think the person that was formally in power within the Democratic National Committee, that was inside of the Council on Foreign Relations, can just be excused of all that. And I think that's something that we, as the people in the know and the people that understand these situations more intimately than the American public, have to be honest with ourselves about. Because no one's coming to save us. There's no superhero going to come in and save the day and pull all the fascists out of our government. Like, that's our job. Like, that's why we're here. That's why you're watching this stream, and that's why we're doing it, is because there's literally a global fascist invasion happening around the world right now, and it takes people like us, the normal average man, to stand up and push back.
And that's real quick, that just, it resonates so well, and it ties in that you need to stop making heroes out of politicians. We are not going to vote or legislate our way out of an oligarchy. That doesn't happen at the ballot box. There has to be a mass mobilization of people demanding their goddamn representation. And it's going to get weird, but it's already weird.
And that's what I hope Tulsi Gabbard becomes, because then I'll put more support into her and more support behind her. Because that's the one thing that Bernie Sanders didn't do, is turn this desperate desire to rid our country of corruption and of like just the nefarious actors that have stripped away everything that is literally protected in this country, like privacy, like the ability to speak freely. And I hope that she'll stand up as someone that doesn't end her campaign and then runs again in 4 years. I hope she's someone that will build this movement to get people to line up outside the halls of power. So I think she has a lot of room to grow, but I think she needs to look at her campaign more as, I'm getting the people in the streets than I'm getting myself into office.
She also did flip on. She also did flip. We saw that weird video that came out on 9/11, but we've spoken about that before. But also, too, now she is favoring impeachment when she was very vocally against it, because she said it's going to distract us. Dak, I know you have a point. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that having gone to her campaigns more times, or rallies more times than I care to admit, she did actually talk about the impeachment thing tonight. This is just some context I want to put in here, because I do not support her call for the impeachment inquiry. It's the second word that's important here, and that's just why I wanted to interject, is because she claims she's supporting just an impeachment inquiry, which is separate from what Schiff was talking about, where he was saying we need to basically go chop Trump's head off right now.
You're right. Thank you for making that clarification.
Yes. So all I wanted to say on that point is I do disagree with her on the call for an inquiry in and of itself, but she did repeatedly say that this needs to be extremely focused. It cannot deviate at all to the left or to the right. We have to be focused only on the specific details, and it needs to be done swiftly, because presumably she doesn't want it to be Russiagate part deux. I mean, I'm not a Tulsi apologist by any means. I just want to put that context out there.
And I think something that's important too, that she has a lot of ability to do with the upcoming debates in Ohio on the 15th and 16th is if impeachment comes up, she can answer with Julian Assange. She can answer with the genocide in Yemen. She can answer with all of these things that aren't necessarily that. And I think that's important because if they bring up impeachment and she doesn't pivot to one of these other bigger issues, it's sad because President Trump over this Ukraine thing is literally innocent. Like it's the dumbest thing in the entire world. But out of it, if there is any glimmer of hope, it is that someone can say Julian Assange's name on a national fucking stage.
I don't know that she will, though, to be honest with you. She's given such little time as it is, and with this next debate, she's going to be given maybe 90 seconds total. So yeah, I mean, I don't think she's going to have the opportunity to talk about Assange on the debate stage, and they certainly won't poll all the candidates just because she mentions it.
Right, and I think so. With the debates too, they're actually here in Ohio. They're just outside of Columbus.
Oh,
So
lucky you.
all of the Ohio people that watch the show, that have been involved with the show, I'm going to try to get them organized for like basically some action events that Sunday and then Monday and then Tuesday, the first day of the debate, and hopefully Tuesday night, just to get a bunch of people out there literally covering that entire city with signs. So as these candidates drive in, they have no choice but to see Julian's name put in their faces. So
yeah, I'll be working with you on that. And Andrew and I definitely want to get some of our friends and other activists in our area to really do this because this is a huge opportunity. And I think we could really, really do some great things. And again, when we work together, we're stronger. But I do want to hand it over to Christy because somebody in the chat.
One more quick thing on that though. So we've contacted Tulsi Gabbard's campaign relentlessly to try to get her on this show, like probably more than I'd be willing to admit to you guys on camera right now. But we need your help with that.
Would you like me to mention it to her in person tomorrow?
She has one of our wristbands, and if you could, that would be awesome.
I'll be seeing her at least twice tomorrow. I can certainly mention it to her. I have
I'll send some more emails to her campaign, but I'm also going to release the link to her event coordinator or her event coordination website where you can put in requests for her to join your show or other shows or things like that. And I think putting in a coordinated effort through her website to get her on here may be something really cool to try and do.
I'll talk to her about it tomorrow.
Cool.
Yeah, Dak, if you could do that, that would be fantastic. And again, mention the wristband. I don't know if she would remember, but one of her very loyal supporters in Chicago, who's working on her campaign, did give her a wristband, and so that was really a big deal for us. We were really excited about that. But
I saw the photo with the wristband.
Yes, actually. It was very cool.
Well, she actually she knew about the Bernie video before I uploaded it. Or before we had our show here tonight, I told her about it. So, I mean, she knew I was coming on the show to do that. I don't know how much she really thought about it, but like, I can certainly talk to her about that first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
That would be awesome.
And because we do always want to educate people on Julian's case, because we do want to provide people with factual information because they really can't get it elsewhere. Niall Flanagan asked, is Julian getting the opportunity to look over his case with his lawyer prior or before this next court date? Christy, I know that you were able to get some more information on that if you want to answer his question.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. You can go to defend.wikileaks.org and there are actual prison updates. And the latest one is from September 30th. And basically it just said there have been no noticeable changes to Julian Assange's prison conditions or treatment since his bail sentence ended on September 22nd. And we knew before that he's had very limited access to his lawyers. And we've talked about multiple times on the show that they can't even bring documents into him, that they have to be posted to the mail. And as we knew, as of a few weeks ago, mail had been stopped. It has now started to be delivered to him. I believe his father said today he received 500 letters that had been held up. So many of you I know have been writing to him and wondering if you're going to get a response or even if he's receiving them. And so hopefully he is up to maybe responding to some of them, but he remains in effective solitary confinement within the healthcare ward, spending 21 to 23 hours in his cell every day and with controlled moves. Every time guards move him from cell to appointment or outside exercise, means the corridors are cleared and prison goes on lockdown when he is moved. So that's our latest update. And yeah, if you have questions and really want to know the source of how to get those updates, defend.wikileaks.org is the perfect place to look for updates on his health, and really no news and no changes. And I believe John Shipton was echoing that this morning too.
Yeah, thank
So
you,
I think
Christy.
the thing with his letter,
I do want to make one quick point here for people that are watching through Nico's channel that are, saying that they do enjoy this show and they look forward to the next one. We are always on Wednesday evenings at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is U.S. time. And we always have a show just providing the latest updates on Julian Assange and anything related to activism and whistleblowing. So if you are interested, you can catch us on our channel and also follow us for more information on @action_4Assange. Go ahead, Andrew.
yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the letters. I actually didn't know that they held Julian's mail and that they weren't giving him the letters to go in, because that's a super interesting point. And I think it's something that's actually that I see that, like, I've witnessed now that I know that is being used not only to fuck with Julian, but to fuck with his supporters as well. I know people of mine that, or friends of mine that have met him personally and that were used to talk with him on Twitter all the time, and used him as almost a way to seek validation for what they were doing, to know that they were at least moving in the right direction and getting like an attaboy or a nod or a virtual high five, so to speak. And with them gagging Julian from even being able to receive those letters to respond in writing, um, it really negatively impacts the community of activism and of the people directly close to him, because they lose that voice. And I think that that's why we need to pressure independent media so much harder to cover this, because something as simple as getting Julian his letters when he's in jail, if one of the big creators ran a piece, gave out the code where you can file a complaint against Belmarsh and said, hey, let the prison know that you give a fuck that Julian's not getting his letters, that's something we can solve very quickly. It may not solve the entire problem that this situation's facing, but a little bit of coverage on these issues from medium to large size creators can create such a big impact.
And let's also not forget that withholding mail compounds the psychological torture that we know has been going on, because the UN Rapporteur for Torture, Nels Milzer, came out and told us, and is a very impassioned words behind his reporting. And the fact that this guy isn't being front and center on even independent media channels.
Right? Like, I would rather
Just
have human civilization have to be rebuilt because of climate change than live in a civilization that figured it out but got rid of all free speech and political dissidents. Like, as horrible as that is to say, defending our right to know and protect ourselves against the government and stop war crimes from happening comes before we demand that this government solves problems like climate change and healthcare. Because
How
if
are
you're
we supposed to
relying,
discuss those things if we don't have a free press or a free speech? Like all the problems in
exactly.
the world and all the shit that's going on in the world, it doesn't matter if we can't talk about it, if we can't print it.
At
Right.
that point, you're basically reduced to Socrates' allegory of the cave, in which you're just guessing at the meanings of shadows.
Hey,
You have
that's
no
really
way to
interesting. You know that Plato's Cave.
I do. I've read
Yes,
way
it's
too
all
much
about seeking the
Plato.
truth. Yeah.
But Nietzsche was better than Plato. But anyway, this is the point here, is that the best we can do is come up with suppositions, but we're just fumbling around dark alleys and not making any kind of actual progress. Personally, I would prefer to have a little bit more information on these issues than that. But that's the only thing that's at stake here with Julian's prosecution.
And whatever cause it is you support the most, or whatever cause your friends support the most, the ability for that cause to continue to be supported relies on access to accurate information. And again, this is not just Julian Assange versus the United States government. This is setting the precedent for any publisher globally who pisses off the United States and prints something that they don't want printed. Because again, Julian Assange, not an American citizen. WikiLeaks, not a US publication.
Or pisses off another country. Like, let's say there's a French journalist that releases some shit about Japan.
Yeah.
Japan then has the global legal precedent to say, hey, well, the United States did this, so why can't we pick this dude up out of France?
Only if it's the
So
French Empire, though. That's the point, is that this
That's
country's
fair.
empire is so far-reaching that we have the ability to do that. Noam Chomsky brought that point up, where he said, why should the United States have the ability to enforce its laws outside of its own boundaries? I mean, do you want your, wherever you work outside of here, should a rival company have the ability to come in and dictate the way that you do business? I mean, it's completely absurd.
Right, but we're subjected to a different, or other countries around the world are subjected to a different set of standards than we are. And I'm not advocating for that. It's wrong, but that's just the reality of it. I don't think another country could get away with this to the extent that the United States has. Don't you guys?
Like, I'm really
agree?
disappointed at some of the free countries in the world, like the Irelands and things like that, that have managed to get those third parties into power with pirates and Greens representing them, that they don't even do anything. Like, they're not willing.
But Ireland's not a free country. They've been subservient to the Brits since.
Well, right, but they've actually started to mobilize to reclaim their sovereignty. That's something that's a big, like, Irish and Scottish thing going on right now that I started to see more and more of.
Well, any time now. I mean, might as
Right.
well honor Michael Collins before my grandchildren are dead. I mean, Jesus Christ. But anyway, that's a different story.
So do we want to, we have another topic yet to tackle. Again, like we said earlier, we have a lot of things to discuss tonight, but it is important. I think we do want to show everybody the Gordon Dimmick video about Chris Williamson, the MP, and his motion to Parliament. We should probably show that. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with Gordon Dimmick. He is a friend of our vigils. He has been on before, and he's a major advocate for Julian Assange and for journalism and free speech.
If you can send me the link, I can pull it up, or if someone has it up and can screen share.
Yep, hold on. It's at the beginning of the chat, but I'll relink you.
So make sure you guys, if this is your first time tuning in, make sure you do like and subscribe to our channel. Like I said, we are on every Wednesday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US. And we always post updates about what we're going to speak about on our Twitter. So you can follow that as well.
Cool. So I got this up here. Let me share it over.
Hi everyone, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who came to the Assange rally at Belmarsh Prison the weekend that I covered. Thank you very much for all your efforts, and thank you for everybody who was spreading the word on Twitter and doing all they could from home. And talking about all they could from home, if you can't make it to any rally.
Oh, I don't think that that's working properly. Let me.
No, it
Was it?
Yes, it was working fine.
Okay.
In support of Julian Assange and a free press and freedom of the press and free speech and journalism. There is something you can do right now that really will go some way to helping him, because the one MP who was at that rally the weekend, Chris Williamson.
That is not showing up too well, but I will link it in the chat for everybody. It just basically caused my screen to like freak out from what I saw.
Yeah, they couldn't see it. Sorry guys, we tried.
The short of it, just so everyone can know, is that there's an MP in England that's actually bringing a motion forth to condemn the treatment of Julian Assange right now. So that's, I don't know if someone wants to dig into more detail on that real quick.
Well, isn't that a nice gesture?
His name's Chris Williamson. He's been interviewed several times at Assange rallies, and he may be the lone, certainly the loudest voice in Parliament that has stood up for Julian Assange. So for even for a motion to get in front of Parliament, that I can't imagine anyone in the United States bringing forward a motion on the floor of Congress to halt the extradition of Julian Assange, to
Maybe Tulsi.
you
See,
know,
that's why we need more Cynthia
I
McKinneys in the
would
world.
love for her to come on this show so I could ask her that question. Would you draft legislation to halt the extradition of Julian Assange? Would you draft legislation to condemn the treatment of Julian Assange?
I think the better question is why haven't, not would.
You know, I understand. I do. I would like to give the opportunity to hear an answer as that didn't start from the point of condemnation.
That's fair. That's very fair.
And so Gordon was asking in his video, or showing rather, how to write to your MP, and encouraging people who live in the UK to find their MP and write them to support and sign on to this motion. And his video is actually quite short, but he's just kind of doing a very simple search and how to get their email addresses. You can also go to Unity4J. We have a tweet on how to contact your MP with links. But really that's for people that live in the UK right now to help support and try to get more signatures.
A great tool for Americans is ResistBot, I think it's called, on Facebook. They also have a text line that you can use. It's and I think they have a Twitter. It's just a text-based thing that they will send faxes and emails for you. They will also connect you with phone calls to your local representatives, whether it's at the state level or at the federal level. So that's a really cool way that if Americans wanted to write or call their senators or congressmen, or even state house and state Senate members, they can call them as well and send them faxes. And that's great when you blow someone's fax machine up with like 4 faxes a day about Julian. It's a good way to like tie up business as usual in Washington.
I actually met a guy who's trying to challenge Jean Shaheen's Senate seat. She's my senator from New Hampshire who's been in government since the dinosaurs. And I asked him, hey, maybe you would differ from Jean Shaheen on this point. She wrote a letter to Mike Pence imploring him to put pressure on the Ecuadorian government to kick Assange out of there. I read about that on ActionForAssange.com. That was the only place I ever heard about that, actually. But he said no. He said he does not support Julian Assange because he thinks that, you know, we have to be very careful about how we're releasing information to the public and so on and so forth. So conversation didn't go anywhere, but I tried.
And I think Noam Chomsky called that the problem with liberal democracies. It may have been Chomsky, but talking about how everything's built on secrecy, where they give this aura of wonderfulness and wholeness and taking care of the worldness, and then in the background hide literally everything that's about them genociding and killing and poisoning water and using vaccines to release diseases and sterilize populations. So I think
and if you're going to run your country on propaganda, which ours is, you have to convince everyone that the outlet with 100% accuracy rating and the guy who published the information that was, at least at the time, vital to what was left of the anti-war movement, what became Occupy Wall Street. The last time that there was real genuine activism on a large scale in this country, I was talking about this with Jason Burmis Sunday on the show. There was a period of time from around 2005 to about 2010, 11, 12, where we had an engaged and activated population to a degree where It had to be covered every single night. Jason Burmis got like 10,000 people to show up to the Bilderberg meeting in West Virginia when he was with InfoWars. And this is, I mean, like, and that's real, dude. That's an activated population. I know there were a ton of problems with Occupy, and there was massive infiltration, but we are going to have to do something bigger than that to make a difference.
And I think this is so one of the big things that inspired me to try to get everyone involved in decentralized activism was the Million Mask March. It's the anonymous event that happens one time a year. It's to remember the 5th of November for anyone out there who's seen V for Vendetta. It's to commemorate the time that they almost got to level the government in the UK. And it's a time for political dissidents to stand up and rise and let their voices be heard. So we have a ton of protest dates. The first one coming up in November, so next month is the 5th, and that's actually before the general election for most places that have off-year elections. There is other big protest dates. The 4th, which is this Thursday or this Friday, marks the 13th anniversary of WikiLeaks. And the 11th marks the 6-month date from when Julian Assange was taken out of the embassy and into the Ecuador and out of the embassy and into Belmarsh prison. So that week, the 4th through the 11th, we're really going to try to push people to get out there, to hang up signs, to attend protests, to be the protest in their town, but also to make it to the larger ones or to try to host a larger one for your community. And then the other dates would be like the 13th through the 15th for the DNC rally. Let's try to make it a national thing. Everyone has local media outlets. If you go there and start hanging up signs around them the same time that we have people out by the DNC's debates hanging up signs, then it's something that we can try to make headlines with and force that into the national conversation. And at the very least, we can try to make headlines with it throughout progressive media. Because right now there's a big problem with the 24-hour news cycle, and every major and minor progressive outlet and independent outlet gets caught up in that and deals with the horse and pony show instead of just trying to construct the truth of what's behind the scenes and what's actually going on. So I think trying to pressure everyone to cover these events in the independent media as well as to create and participate in them is one of the most important things that we can do. So October 4th through the 11th, the 13th through the 15th, and the 5th of November are the big dates that I have right now for upcoming protests.
And New Hampshire has a huge Assange supporter by the name of Placille. You can follow her on Twitter. I'm sure she'll be involved in all of that. So she and I will coordinate. We've met several times. So
cool.
Oh, that's great. So I do think that is all we have for news updates tonight. But before we do all go around and close out and let everybody know where they can find us, I want to open it up to the co-hosts. If anybody has any last thoughts they want to give right now, or any updates of anything that's going on. I guess not. All right. Well, I want to once again, or maybe Andrew does. I could see his face.
No, there's just a correction. YVIY1 in chat said it is Iceland, not Ireland. So I meant Iceland for the people that have thrown out their banksters and have instituted a pirate or green government. So thank you for that correction there.
Okay, so I want to, again, on behalf of all of us, thank Nico House and the MCSC Network, Jason Carney with the people of the 99% and Anonymous Fights Back for collaborating with us tonight. This was a really fun episode, and we also want to thank Dak for being with us. We really appreciate it, and we enjoyed having him on, and I personally appreciate working with you, Dak, and again, like I said, you are providing me with a lot of information about the candidates for my article. But that is all I have. I will be on Real Progressives to talk about my article, so I'm sure we'll get into the Bernie stuff. I'll be on Real Progressives next Thursday, October 10th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US. And my name is Taylor Hudak, if you don't know me. And which most people don't. You can follow me on Twitter at _Taylor Hudak. Thank you guys so much for watching.
And then where can they find you at, Dak?
They can find me at Dak Rouleau on Twitter. They can find me at overwritten.org. Every Friday night, actually, on YouTube, D. Pierce SSC has me on his show to debate. Well, we recorded on Friday nights, but then it's aired later in the week. He's a huge Andrew Yang supporter, but he likes hearing from the other side, and so he's had me on several times. I'm now a regular guest, and I really enjoy talking to him.
All right. Thank you, to everybody who let us broadcast. This was a really cool episode to get more viewers in. We hope you will like and subscribe and share our show because we're on every Wednesday night. Thank you, Dak, for turning my Twitter suspension into something productive and getting Bernie's answer and letting us premiere it here live. And you can follow me at ChristyMKD84 and follow me at Unity4J. I help run that account. If you have any actions you're taking in the month of October, tag us, tag me. Let us help you promote it on Twitter.
Cool. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. And then you can find us over at action_4Assange and also action4Assange.com. That's where I try to post all the stuff coming up about the different protests and things. So check it out on there. I have the Million Mask March location up, and I'm going to get the UAW one up here soon as well.
All right, and if you're seeing me for the first time, again, I'm Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day. I provide news and interviews with truly independent media. It is not a commercial for your favorite duopoly politician, nor will it ever be. If I criticize someone in the duopoly, it's because they know. I want to thank everyone who has participated in this with us tonight, and that's everyone who's watching as well. We really appreciate you. Much love to my co-hosts and everyone who participated in the chat. And thank you very much. You guys have a good evening.